Hi, it's Kim from Chatterbox Quilts. I am lucky enough to be the owner of a very rare Singer 2-thread embroidery attachment. And in this video, I'm going to show you how it fits on the machine and how you use it. The Singer 2-thread embroidery attachment actually comes in two parts. So it came in this small box and it had the instructions with it. And then there's these two parts. So let me just show you a few things about them. First off, the mechanism works back and forth like this. And you can see there's lots of moving parts. This is actually going to move up and down as well. So there's lots of, that's what activates these little jaws sort of at the bottom. And so there's lots of moving parts on this machine. Well, machine, it's like a machine, it's actually an attachment. So you want to oil it. So when I first got this one, it was very stiff, but I put some Tri-Flow on it. So any place that moves, so in here, back in here, underneath, if you can get in underneath these little jaws, that all needs oiling to make it work properly, and it makes a huge difference on them as well. The second part here, again, there's some moving parts up here, and so I did some oiling in here as well. So these parts actually, of course, go together, but let me explain what this part is for. The arms come up and they hold spools of thread, one on each arm. So in the old days, you would have spools of thread like this, and you may still see some of these, but most of my spools look like this. And they don't fit on very well, they're too big. So what I did when I was using this attachment is I just wound some bobbins, and because I was using a thicker thread, I hand wound them. But if you're using regular thread, you can just wind it on your regular bobbin winder, and then you can see that the bobbins are going to fit on no problem. There's nothing that attaches to keep them on or anything. It's just this little upward part of the metal arm that's going to keep them on. So you don't need to worry if they're going to move back and forth. They really don't. So if you don't have these types of spools, you can use bobbins instead, and that'll work just fine. So now you want to learn how to put it on the machine. I'll move this down just a little bit. This goes in together here. So you can see that there's a bit of a wider part here on this part of the attachment. So that's going to go over this little screw, I guess it really is. And it just pushes in. It doesn't go all the way up, and it'll come back and forth a bit. So just be a little careful, but it does push down and it'll kind of stay in place there. Now, how do you get this onto your machine? You probably haven't got a clue. I didn't at first either. Anyway, what you need to do is you need to take off your regular presser foot, or whatever foot you may have on there. So just take that right off, because this is where the 2-thread embroidery attachment is going to go on. And similar to the walking foot that we have on modern day machines, you have this little arm here, and that wants to go over the needle bar there. So let me just move a few things out of the way so you can see this better. So I found, I should say, that the easiest thing to do is to take the little screw right off. Now this attachment used to come, or should have come, I should say, with a screw that's a bit smaller. The head is a bit smaller than this. This one didn't come with it, and this will work just fine, but it does get in the way when you're putting it on. So take it right off, and you can see, much like on your regular presser foot, there is this area that you would attach it to your needle bar. So it just goes over, and the arm will fit right on top of where the needle screw is there. So that's perfect. Then you're going to take your little screw, and you're going to take it and put it right back in there. So I can screw that in. So make sure it's in good and tight. This attachment's going to move around a lot. You don't want it coming off partway through your stitching. So there you've got it on. You're going to move up the little arms and put your bobbins in there. And next I'll show you how you actually thread this to use on your sewing machine. Now that you've got the Singer 2-thread embroidery attachment on your sewing machine, let me explain about the threading, because it's a little complicated and the instructions are not really very clear about it. First off, when this was made, they didn't have long spools like we use these days. They were the shorter spools that would fit on here. So if you're having problems getting your spools of thread on there, in other words, if they're too long, do what I did. I just took some extra bobbins, and it doesn't have to be bobbins that go on this machine, just any bobbin will fit, of course, on this. And I just hand wound some thread here, or you can actually, the reason I hand wound this thread is a bit thicker, but if you're using a bit thinner thread, you can probably just wind it on your regular sewing machine. Then you can just stick the bobbins onto the arms here, and that'll work just fine. So I've used two contrasting colors here, and what you need to do is you need to bring them down and in between these two pins, but underneath this part right here. Now this part is a tension spring, they call it in the instructions, and you can actually undo this little screw here a bit, and that gives you a bit of wiggle room to get those threads in there, and then you can tighten it up again. You don't have to tighten all the way down, but just so there's a bit of tension on there is good. So the blue thread is coming down underneath this tension spring between these two little pins here, and you can see it's coming out in the opposite side. So in essence, the threads are crossed now. Same thing with the pink one. It's coming down underneath the tension spring, but between, I should say, these two pins. And then they come down, they go through this hole here, and then they're going to come out, and by this time they're coming back to the right side. So the blue is coming back to this side of the attachment, the right side, and it's going from the inside out through the hole here, and then down from the top down to the bottom through the hole here. Same with the pink. It's come back to its right side through the hole here. It's going from the inside out through that hole, and then from the top down to the bobbin through the bottom, I should say, through this hole. Now your machine is still threaded with your regular thread, and you'll see this thread a bit as well. So you can pick a contrasting color. You might want to match one of the thread colors, your choice, but I'm just using a regular, I think this is a maybe 50 weight cotton thread, and same as in my bobbin. The one thing you do want to make sure is that these threads, and the same with your top thread and your bobbin thread, are going back underneath the presser foot. So you need to make sure that these threads are going into the center and underneath this presser foot area. You do not want the threads to come down, like say for example this pink one, if it came down and it went underneath the presser foot, but from the outside under, that will not work. It will not catch the threads to make that braid. So make sure they're both in there. So really at the back of the machine, you're going to come out with 4 threads. Your top and bobbin threads, which should be the same color, and then you're going to come out with your heavier decorative threads as well. So you have 4 threads going through there. All right. You want to see what this attachment will actually do. You're going to need some fabric to sew on. So I've just got some white here, so you'll hopefully be able to see this very well. And I've put some stabilizer behind it. I put an iron-on stabilizer behind it because you're going to need that with all these threads going through. So once that's all on there, you want to adjust your stitch length and make it a little bit longer too. This works better with a longer stitch length than say a 10 or 12. So a little bit longer than that is good. And you're going to put your presser foot lever down, of course, and then you're ready to start stitching. So when you're stitching with this attachment, you want to go slow if you can. It's always a bit of a challenge sometimes, and I'm using a knee lever, so hopefully it goes okay, but just start stitching. All right. So let me just move this around so you can see what it does here. You can see it creates this braided effect. You can see a bit of the white thread that I'm using in the top, and just to let you see what's happening on the bottom, you can't see any of those 2 threads. They're not actually going very much into the fabric at all. They're laying on the top, of course, and being braided. So you can create all kinds of different designs with this attachment. So let me see if I can do something a little more fancy. Now I'm getting caught up in my thread stand at the back here, so let me just move that out of the way. So you can create little circles and spirals, and those types of things are quite pretty with this. So all kinds of little designs. So if you want, you can even mark designs on your fabric and then stitch along them with this. So it's very pretty, very decorative. Quite interesting how it works. It reminds me of a praying mantis. If you take a close-up look at what the arms on this are doing, if I can go slow enough, you can see them here. Or if I even do it with my hand wheel, my hand, you can see they go in to cross those threads. Then they're coming back out and in again. So it's quite interesting little attachment. If you're ever fortunate to pick up one of these or you see them somewhere, grab it. They're very rare. but very decorative.